Hello guys, Daryl Smith from South Dakota here. Uh, the title of my little story today is a takeoff into our future. And there's a pun intended there since we were attempting to be a career in aviation. We left the farm, drove south on Highway 51 to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Got a hotel room there. I think we paid $10 or $12 for it. And the next day proceeded on to Pensacola for our initial training, attempting to become a naval aviator. We had no idea how to look for a place to live. We thought of maybe a newspaper, so we bought a newspaper and scanned the for rent ads. One of the first ones we saw offered a duplex about 4 or 5 miles west of town on Lillian Highway on Perdido Bay. We called and the landlady said that the price was $80 a month. We didn't have that much money. We went out and looked at it and we wanted it. And I was nervous and scared, but I asked her, would she take $30 down and the rest of it on our first payday, which would be about a week later. Thank goodness she agreed. It was a wonderful house. We were right on the bay, and so different from our life in Tennessee. We never saw water there, just hills and trees. So we did get this house and we moved in, and we considered it a perfect house. It was very simple. It was built a long time ago and the walls were very thin. And it was the arrangement in the house was such that both the bedrooms were at one end of the house, so that they were right together. And we were only separated by that thin wall. Well, it just so happened that the people next door were just like Glenda and I. We had, they were newlyweds, and he was in the process of doing the same thing as I was, trying to become a naval aviator. Well, it just so happened that the wife of this couple was very vocal during their sexual activities every night. She would give specific and demanding instructions. We never heard him say a word, but we could imagine the sweat on his brow trying to fulfill her demands. He washed out of the flight program soon after that, and we don't know for sure whether it was because he couldn't grasp the fundamentals of flight or the tremendous stress he was dealing with every night at home. One thing we do remember was that they one day they fired up a little charcoal grill outside, and the air was moving just so that the fumes aroma from that grill came through our windows. They grilled steaks. It was a marvelous smell. We had never had grilled steaks before in our life. While we were there, we went, one of the favorite things for Glenda was going to the beach. The Gulf of Mexico was there, and the big waves would come in and splash, and there was white sand all around and not many people, and it was fun. Even Glenda's mom and dad and younger sister came for a visit, and I remember spending a long, very fun day at the beach with them. Well, my pre-flight class, that's what I was there for, to start a pre-flight. First of all, the only military training I had was the PLC program, and it was basically a boot camp. So they yelled at you constantly. If you screwed up just a little bit, they were in your face, and that's the only experience I had. Normally, after this training, a Marine officer would go to what they called a basic school, which they would teach you military stuff and how to act and what to expect and that sort of thing. I was just shocked when I walked around base and people were saluting me and calling me sir. It was just such a shock. I can't tell you. In pre-flight, we studied engines, aerodynamics, hydraulics systems, electrical systems, and we also maintain a certain level of physical conditioning. We were formed up and ran maybe 2 miles out to an obstacle course and timed as we called it a monster, as we had to go over this monster. We'd run the obstacle course maybe 2 times, climb walls, under logs, over logs, all kind of obstacles, and then run back to main side. Along the seawall, the USS Lexington carrier would be tied up most of the time, and it was to walk alongside. It was a huge machine, and we all knew without a doubt that if we were successful, we would sooner or later approach that machine in an aircraft with the hopes of arrested landings and catapult takeoffs. Quite intimidating. We learned that our next step in training, if we were successful in pre-flight, was at Softly Field, and we would be flying T-34 aircraft, a little small propeller-driven aircraft. Glenda and I, in order to just see what was going on over there, drove over one day on the day off, or when we had some time off, parked in the parking lot, and we could see the activity. Quite intimidating again, in that there must have been 30 of these little airplanes, all engines running, moving in every direction. It looked like it was disorganized completely, and I could not imagine myself being part of this thing. Well, everybody in our class made it through pre-flight, and we all went to Softly Field. I was assigned to an instructor. I can't remember his name, but they called him Cotton. He was named Cotton Davis. Cotton Davis was his name. He was a nice guy, and one morning on my first flight, we were sent out as a weather flight. So we were going up and to check the weather and to make the determination where they were going to launch the whole flying schedule for that day. Well, Cotton took me above the clouds. They were broken clouds, and we could see a hole in the clouds, and he was going to go back down below. He was flying the airplane, and he rolled the airplane up into an angle of bank and nosed down through that hole toward the ground. And I said, well, this is it, I'm dead. And but he saved us. We didn't die. So on that first flight, we got out of the cockpit. I had wobbly knees, and I started to walk away. And I said, sir, I threw up. I used an air sick bag. And he said, you better get it. So I went back to get it, and I had made very good use of the air sick bag on that first flight. Never got sick again. That was it. That was the end of it. So these guys, I was just amazed. I knew nothing of aviation, but these instructors took us by our hands and led us one step at a time until I remember it was kind of a shock. One day, I was lined up on the runway, and I pushed the throttle forward, and I was alone. It was my solo flight. and I lived, but I was surprised that I had progressed to the point where they felt confident that I could do that. In those days, it was a tradition for the students to give the instructor a bottle of booze. At that time, I had never tasted booze in my life. I bought a bottle of Cutty Sark blended whiskey and gave it to Cotton Davis, my instructor. It put a big dent in our budget. I think it cost about $8, but I wouldn't have it no other way. I was successful in that second phase of that flying, and I found out that the guys with the students with the better grades would go to Meridian, Mississippi to the jet pipeline, and the rest of them would go to Whiting Field, which is only about 10 miles away, for prop training, and they would end up flying helicopters or transport planes. To me, jets just seemed like something that I wanted to do. Well, just about time I was ready to leave the squadron, I was called to the squadron office and introduced to a man who happened to be the head coach for the football team for that Naval Air Station. At that time, the military bases fielded a football team. And as a matter of fact, when I was in college in Martin, Tennessee, we played the Millington Naval Air Station football team and beat them too. But anyway, he asked me to join their team. I think that came from a high school and college football team fellow player, was playing on that team, and he probably knew that I was going through training and had some football experience, so that's probably why they asked me to join the team. I said, I've got, they're sending me to Jets, and that's what I want. I've got it. So I'm going there. And he said, yes, but if you play football, I can guarantee you Jets. You will get Jets. I'd taken a beating in college. I'd run the ball as much as 30 times a game. And I said, no, I'm going to go to Jets. And so that's the end of that story. So all at once, Glenda and I packed up our car and headed on the road to Meridian, Mississippi for our jet training. That's my story. Thank you very much.